The look on my brother's face when I handed him the deed was priceless. Knox just stood there, his mouth hanging open like he'd seen a ghost. His hands were shaking as he read the property address, 1247, Whispering Pines Road. The same land he'd been obsessing over for 3 years. The same 20 acres he swore he'd own someday. Except now, it had my name on it. Sloane Mercer. Not Knox Mercer. You should have seen him try to speak. Nothing came out but this weird choking sound. And me? I just smiled and said, guess I can handle money after all, big brother. But let me back up and tell you how we got here. First, let me introduce myself properly. My name is Sloane, I'm 28 years old, and I live in Cedar Falls, Nebraska. I own a small bakery called Sweet Things, and until recently, everyone in my family thought I was hopeless with money. This story didn't start with revenge. It started with a lifetime of being treated like I was too stupid to tie my own shoes. Knox is 4 years older than me. I'm 28 now, he's 32. Growing up in small-town Nebraska, everyone knew the Mercer kids. Knox was the golden boy, star quarterback, honor roll student, full scholarship to the state university. I was just Knox's little sister who got decent grades and worked part-time at Miller's grocery store. Our parents died in a car accident when I was 19. Knox had just graduated college with a business degree and landed some fancy job in Omaha. I was still figuring out what I wanted to do with my life. After the funeral, Knox basically appointed himself as my financial guardian, even though I was legally an adult. Sloane, you need to be smart with the inheritance money, he'd say, counting out the bills like I was 12 years old. This needs to last you until you get your act together. We each got about $60,000 from life insurance and selling our childhood home. Knox immediately started lecturing me about investments and savings accounts. Meanwhile, he bought himself a brand new truck and moved into a fancy apartment. The worst part? Knox had this way of making everything sound like he was helping me. I'm just looking out for you, Sloane. You've never been good with numbers. Or my personal favorite, remember when you spent your allowance on those stupid stickers? You haven't changed much. Those stickers were collector's items that I sold for 3 times what I paid. But Knox never remembered that part. For years, I let it slide. When Knox rolled his eyes at my financial decisions, I ignored it. When he'd make little comments about my shopping habits or my unrealistic expectations, I'd bite my tongue. Even when I started my own small business, a bakery called Sweet Things, he'd make jokes about how playing house wasn't a real career. But the land, that's where everything changed. Whispering Pines Road sits about 15 miles outside our hometown of Cedar Falls. 20 acres of beautiful rolling hills, with a creek running right through the middle and this amazing grove of old oak trees. The property had an old farmhouse that needed work, but it had good bones. It was the kind of place you could see yourself growing old in. Knox had been talking about that land since college. Every time we'd drive past it, he'd slow down and point it out. Someday, Sloane. Someday I'm gonna own that place. I'm gonna fix up that house and raise my kids there. It's perfect. He knew everything about that property. The square footage, the soil quality, the water rights, the zoning laws. He'd researched it obsessively. The owner was an elderly man named Garrison Hutchins who wasn't interested in selling. But Knox was patient. He'd check in with old Garrison every few months, just staying friendly, waiting for his chance. When Hutchins is ready to sell, I'll be ready to buy, Knox would say. I've been saving for years. I already know exactly what I'll offer him. Knox talked about that land the way other people talk about their dreams. It wasn't just property to him. It was his future. His legacy. The place where he'd prove he'd made something of himself. Which is probably why what happened next hurt so much. It was last September at our cousin Meridian's wedding reception. The whole family was there. Aunts, uncles, cousins we only saw at funerals and weddings. I was having a good time, dancing with my cousin Thorne's kids, when Knox started telling everyone about his latest business venture. He'd invested in some tech startup with his college buddy. The way he told it, he was basically the next Warren Buffett. Everyone was impressed, asking questions about the stock market and cryptocurrency. Knox was eating up the attention. Then my Aunt Vesper asked about my bakery. Oh, Sloane's still playing around with her little cake business, Knox said, not even looking at me. It's cute, but it's not exactly a real investment strategy. Actually, I said, Sweet Things had our best quarter yet. I'm thinking about expanding to a second location. Knox laughed. Actually, I laughed. Sloane, come on. You can barely keep track of your personal finances. Remember when you tried to buy that used car without checking the Carfax? I had to stop you from getting ripped off. The whole table got quiet. I felt my face burning red. That car thing happened 2 years ago, and I hadn't asked for his help. Knox just inserted himself into the situation because he couldn't stand watching me make my own decisions. Knox, Look, I love my sister, he continued, turning to our relatives like I wasn't even there. But some people are just better with money than others. Sloane's got other talents. She makes killer chocolate chip cookies. But handling serious money? That's just not her thing. I sat there feeling about 2 inches tall while everyone nodded along. Knox kept talking about his investment portfolio and his 5-year plan. He mentioned the Whispering Pines land, telling everyone how he'd been strategically positioning himself to make an offer when the time was right. Real estate is all about timing and preparation, he said. You can't just stumble into these deals. You need to understand market values, financing options, negotiation tactics. It takes a certain kind of financial intelligence. That's when I knew exactly what I had to do. I went home that night and opened my laptop. First, I looked up everything I could find about Garrison Hutchins and his property. Knox wasn't the only one who could do research. Turns out, Knox had been wrong about a few things. Garrison's grandson Camden lived in Denver and had been trying to convince his grandfather to sell for months. Camden was worried about Garrison maintaining the property at his age. I found Camden's contact information through social media and sent him a friendly message. Hi Camden, I'm a local who's always admired your grandfather's beautiful property. If he's ever interested in selling, I'd love to discuss it with him. Camden called me the next day. Garrison was indeed thinking about selling, but he was picky about buyers. He didn't want developers or investors who'd tear down the house and subdivide the land. He wanted someone who'd appreciate the property and take care of it. Grandpa's not motivated by money, Camden explained. He's got enough to live comfortably. He just wants to know the land will go to someone who loves it like he does. Perfect. Because unlike Knox, I wasn't approaching this as a business deal. I genuinely loved that property. I'd always thought it was beautiful, even before Knox became obsessed with it. But loving the land wasn't enough. I needed money. A lot of money. I started by looking at my finances honestly. Sweet Things was doing better than I'd let on to Knox. I'd been conservative with my numbers because every time I shared good news, Knox found ways to downplay it or poke holes in my plans. The bakery was bringing in about $8,000 a month in profit. Not bad for a small business in rural Nebraska. I'd been saving aggressively, living in the small apartment above the bakery to keep my overhead low. I had about $45,000 in savings. But the land would probably cost between $200,000 and $300,000. I needed a bigger plan. First, I approached the bank about a business loan. My bakery's books were solid, and I had a good relationship with the loan officer, Sage Morrison. She approved me for a line of credit that I could use for business expansion or investment. Next, I started hustling like I'd never hustled before. I took on catering jobs I'd previously turned down because they were too much work. I started selling my baked goods to 3 neighboring towns. I even began teaching weekend baking classes that brought in an extra $1,500 a month. The hardest part was keeping it secret from Knox. He'd drop by the bakery sometimes, usually when he was in town visiting friends. I had to be careful not to mention the extra income or the new contracts. When he asked how business was going, I'd just say, same old, same old. Knox loved that response. It confirmed his belief that I was stuck in place while he was moving up in the world. I also started researching the real estate market obsessively. I learned about comparable sales, property taxes, and inspection processes. I studied financing options and talked to 3 different real estate agents about the best approach for rural property purchases. Within 6 months, I had about $80,000 saved and a pre-approval letter for a $250,000 mortgage. I was ready to make an offer. In March, I finally arranged to meet Garrison Hutchins. Camden had told him about me, and Garrison agreed to show me around the property on a Sunday afternoon. Garrison was everything Camden had described, a sweet old man who clearly loved his land. He walked me through every acre, telling stories about the wildlife and pointing out his favorite spots. The creek where he'd taught his sons to fish. The oak grove where his late wife used to read books. The hill where they'd watched 4th of July fireworks every year. "This place has been in my family for 43 years, Garrison said as we sat on his front porch. "My wife picked out this house. She said the kitchen had a perfect morning light for her coffee." I could tell he was testing me, trying to figure out if I was serious or just curious. So I told him the truth. About growing up in Cedar Falls, about my parents' accident, about building my business from nothing. I explained how I'd always admired his property and could picture myself taking care of it the way he had. "What about that young man who stops by sometimes?" Garrison asked. "Knox something. He seems mighty interested in buying this place." My heart stopped. But I kept my voice steady. "Knox is my brother. He's mentioned the property before." "Nice enough fellow," Garrison said. "But he talks about this place like it's some kind of investment opportunity. Keeps mentioning property values and development potential. That's not really what I'm looking for in a buyer." I felt a surge of hope. Knox's business-focused approach was actually working against him. "Mr. Hutchins," I said, "I'm not looking at this as an investment. I'm looking at it as a home. Somewhere I could put down real roots." We talked for 2 more hours. About the town's history, about maintaining old houses, about the responsibility of owning land. By the time I left, I could tell Garrison liked me. But he wasn't ready to commit to anything yet. "Let me think about it," he said. "Camden's been pushing me to make a decision, but this is a big step. Give me a month or so." I agreed, even though waiting felt impossible. Every day, I worried that Knox would somehow find out what I was doing. Or that another buyer would come along. Or that Garrison would change his mind entirely. 3 weeks later, Knox showed up at my bakery with news. "You'll never guess what happened," he said, barely containing his excitement. "I was talking to Mrs. Carmichael at the hardware store, and she mentioned that old Garrison Hutchins is finally thinking about selling his land." My stomach dropped, but I kept decorating the wedding cake I was working on. "Oh yeah? That's interesting." "Interesting? Sloane, this is huge. I've been waiting for this opportunity for years. I'm going to call Camden today and set up a meeting." Knox paced around my kitchen, practically vibrating with energy. He started talking about his plans for the property, his financing options, his timeline for making an offer. It was torture listening to him, knowing I was already 3 steps ahead in the process. "I figure Garrison will want around $250 for the place," Knox continued. "I've got about $60,000 for a down payment, and my bank has already pre-approved me for the rest. This could really be it, Sloane. My dream property." "That's great, Knox," I managed to say. "I hope it works out." "It will," he said confidently. "I mean, who else around here has the financial capability to make a serious offer? This is destiny." After Knox left, I called Camden immediately. "Hey, it's Sloane. I think my brother might be reaching out to you soon about the property. I just wanted you to know that I'm still very interested if your grandfather is ready to move forward." Camden laughed. "Actually, Grandpa mentioned you yesterday. He said he's made up his mind. He wants to sell it to you if you're still interested." I nearly dropped the phone. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. He said you're the kind of person who'll take care of the place right. Can you come by this weekend to talk about the details?" I could barely concentrate for the rest of the week. Knox called Camden and left several voicemails, but Camden was smart enough not to call him back until after Harwell and I had finalized our agreement. Saturday morning, I sat in Garrison's kitchen while he and Camden explained their terms. They wanted $230,000, less than I'd expected. Garrison was more interested in finding the right buyer than maximizing his profit. "I've got one condition," Garrison said. "I want to stay in the house until the end of summer. Camden's found me a nice place in town, but I need time to pack up 43 years of memories." "Of course," I said. "Take all the time you need." We shook hands right there at his kitchen table. Camden said he'd have his lawyer draw up the papers within a week. I'd officially own the Whispering Pines property by the end of April. Walking back to my car, I felt like I was floating. I'd actually done it. I'd outmaneuvered Knox and bought his dream property. The property he'd been talking about for years. The property he thought he was destined to own. But the best part was still coming. I spent 2 weeks planning exactly how to tell Knox. It had to be perfect. Public enough that he couldn't explode at me, but private enough that he'd show his true reaction. I decided on Sunday dinner at our cousin Meridian's house. She'd invited the whole family for her husband's birthday, and Knox would definitely be there. Plus, it was the same cousin whose wedding reception had started this whole thing. I asked Meridian if I could make an announcement during dinner, claiming I had some exciting business news to share. She was thrilled, thinking I was probably expanding the bakery. The night before, I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining Knox's face when he realized what had happened. Part of me felt guilty. This was his dream I was crushing. But then I remembered every dismissive comment, every condescending lecture, every time he'd made me feel small. Knox had brought this on himself. Sunday arrived, and I drove to Meridian's house with the deed in my purse. My hands were shaking, but I felt more confident than I had in years. Dinner was going perfectly. Knox was in a great mood, telling everyone about his latest business successes. He mentioned that he was close to closing a major real estate deal and kept checking his phone for messages from Camden. After dessert, Meridian clinked her wine glass and asked for everyone's attention. "Sloane has some exciting news to share with all of us," she announced. Knox looked up from his phone with mild interest. "What's up, little sister? Finally ready to franchise the bakery?" I stood up, my heart pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. "Actually, I wanted to share some personal news. I just bought my first piece of real estate." Knox smiled condescendingly. "That's great, Sloane. What did you buy? A little condo in town?" "Not exactly." I reached into my purse and pulled out the deed, setting it on the table in front of him. "I bought 1247 Whispering Pines Road. 20 acres, including the farmhouse." The color drained from Knox's face. He picked up the deed with shaking hands, reading it slowly like he couldn't believe the words. This can't be right," he stammered. "This is the Hutchins property. I've been negotiating to buy this place." "Were you?" I asked innocently. "Because Garrison told me he'd never actually spoken to you about selling. Just that you'd driven by a few times and expressed interest." Knox's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Our whole family was staring at him, then at me, trying to understand what was happening. "But I had plans for this property," Knox said, his voice getting higher. "I've been saving for years. I had it all figured out." "I'm sure you did," I said calmly. "But it turns out I can handle money after all." "Who would have thought?" Knox tried to backtrack immediately. "Sloane, if you wanted to buy property, you should have talked to me first. I could have helped you find something more suitable. This place needs a lot of work. The financing alone must be." "Actually, I managed the financing just fine," I interrupted. "Turns out running a successful business for 5 years gives you pretty good credit." He tried a different approach. "Look, maybe we can work something out. I could buy it from you. I'll pay whatever you paid, plus a profit for your trouble." "It's not for sale, Knox." "But you don't understand," he said desperately. "This property, it's been my dream since college. I had a whole plan. I was going to restore the house, maybe start a family there. Then maybe you should have actually made an offer instead of just talking about it for 3 years." The room was dead silent. Knox looked around the table, probably hoping someone would back him up or tell me I was being unreasonable. But everyone just stared. Even our usually supportive Aunt Vesper looked impressed. "I can't believe you did this behind my back," Knox finally said. "I didn't do anything behind your back," I replied. "I made a legitimate offer on a piece of property that was for sale. Just like you could have done at any time." Knox stood up abruptly, shoving his chair back from the table. "This is unbelievable. You've never shown any interest in real estate before. You don't even know what you're doing." "Maybe not," I said. "But I know what I've done. I bought the land you wanted. And unlike you, I didn't spend 3 years just talking about it." Knox stormed out without another word. I heard his truck doors slam in the driveway, then the engine roaring as he peeled out. The rest of the family sat in stunned silence for a moment. Then our cousin Thorne started laughing. Holy see. Through my family that he was furious and embarrassed. Apparently, he'd been bragging to his friends about the property deal he was about to close. Having to explain that his little sister had bought his dreamland instead was humiliating. I didn't feel bad about it. Not even a little bit. The property deal closed smoothly in late April. Garrison moved to his new place in town at the end of summer, and I officially moved into the farmhouse in September. It needed work, just like Knox had always said, but I loved every challenging minute of renovating it. The best part? The land turned out to be even more perfect than I'd imagined. I converted part of the farmhouse into a commercial kitchen and started doing all my baking there. The extra space let me expand my catering business and take on bigger contracts. Within 6 months, my income had doubled. Knox finally reached out in November, right before Thanksgiving. He sent a text asking if we could talk. We met at a coffee shop in town, neutral territory. I owe you an apology, he said right away. I've been thinking about this for months, and I was wrong. About the land, about your business, about a lot of things. I appreciate that, I said. I still don't understand how you managed the financing, he admitted. I mean, I'm genuinely impressed. But I'm also confused. I explained about the business loan, the extra income I'd been generating, and the aggressive saving plan I'd followed. Knox listened without interrupting, looking more and more surprised as I went on. You never told me the bakery was doing that well, he said. You never asked, I replied. You just assumed it wasn't. Knox nodded slowly. You're right. I guess I got so used to thinking of you as my little sister who needed protection that I never noticed you'd grown up. I've been grown up for a while, Knox. You just never wanted to see it. These days, Knox and I have a better relationship than we've had in years. He still gives financial advice sometimes, but now he asks about my situation first instead of just assuming I'm screwing up. And when I tell him about my business plans or investment ideas, he actually listens. He's dating someone new, a woman named Paisley who works in marketing. She's smart and doesn't take any of his crap, which I think is exactly what Knox needs. He seems happier and less obsessed with proving he's successful all the time. As for the land, it's everything I dreamed it would be. I've got 2 horses now, rescues from a farm outside of town. I grow vegetables in the garden Garrison's wife started decades ago. On quiet evenings, I sit on the front porch where Garrison used to sit, watching the sunset over the hills. Knox drove out to see the place a few months ago. I gave him the full tour, showing him the renovations I'd made and my plans for the property. He was genuinely impressed, though I could tell it still stung a little to see me living his dream. It suits you, he said as we stood by the creek. I hate to admit it, but Garrison was right. You're taking better care of this place than I probably would have. Thanks, I said. That means a lot. For what it's worth, Knox added, I'm proud of you. I should have said that years ago. Looking back, I think this whole experience taught me something important about standing up for yourself. For years, I let Knox make me feel small because it was easier than fighting back. I told myself he meant well, that he was just trying to help, that family peace was more important than my pride. But the truth is, Knox needed to be proven wrong. Not just for my sake, but for his. He'd gotten so comfortable being the smart, successful older brother that he'd stopped seeing me as a real person with my own capabilities and dreams. Buying that land wasn't just about revenge, though the revenge was definitely satisfying. It was about proving to myself that I could handle big decisions, big money, and big dreams. It was about showing Knox and everyone else that being underestimated can be a powerful advantage. These days, when family members talk about investments or business deals, they ask for my opinion too. Not just Knox's. It's a small thing, but it means everything to me. The land is worth about $320,000 now, according to the latest county assessment. I could sell it tomorrow and make a nice profit. But I won't. This isn't an investment property. It's home. And every morning when I drink my coffee in the kitchen that gets perfect morning light, I think about how sometimes the best revenge is just living well. Knox wanted this land because he thought it would prove he'd made it. But for me, it's not about proving anything to anyone anymore. It's just about being exactly where I belong. The look on Knox's face when I handed him that deed really was priceless. But the look on my face every morning when I wake up in my dream house? That's worth even more.